Ever feel like you're living in the wrong century? Octavia Butler takes that feeling to a whole other level with Kindred, and that's what we're diving into today.
Yeah, it's more than just a time travel story, though, right? It really makes you think about slavery and family and how we're connected to the past, even when it's painful.
And you've given us so much to think about with these sources, a Kirkus review, Butler's Wikipedia page, even some thought-provoking online reviews. Let's start with the story itself.
Okay, so we have Dana, a young black woman living in 1970s Los Angeles, and suddenly she's transported back in time to a pre-Civil War Maryland plantation.
Whoa, talk about a culture shock.
Right, and it gets even more intense because she's not just there to observe, she's there to protect this young white boy,
Who
Rufus.
she later finds out is connected to her in this really unsettling way.
Exactly. And that's where the time travel element goes beyond just a plot device. One of the online reviews you shared called it a tool for social commentary, which I thought was interesting. How do you think Dana's experience in both centuries changes the way we see the legacy of slavery?
That's a really good question, and I think it gets to the heart of what makes this book so powerful. It's one thing to read about slavery in a history book,
Right.
right? But to see it through the eyes of someone who understands the modern world, to feel that raw brutality, it hits different.
It does. And the Kirkus review uses those words raw and brutal to describe Butler's writing, and I think that's spot on. She doesn't shy away from the realities of the antebellum South. We're right there with Dana experiencing the weight of history.
Absolutely. And speaking of Dana, the online reviews were really drawn to her character. One even called her a feminist hero. I mean, I was blown away by her strength. Just imagine being ripped from your life and thrown into that environment. What did you make of her journey?
It's a testament to the resilience of black women throughout history. Dana refuses to be a victim. She's thrown into this horrific situation, but she's determined to hold on to her sense of self. It's incredibly powerful.
It really is. And it challenges those stereotypical portrayals of enslaved people we sometimes see. She's not just trying to survive, she's fighting for her very existence.
Yeah.
And that really resonated with me.
And, Butler herself said that she wanted to show the strength and courage of those who endured slavery. And I think she did that brilliantly with Dana. She's put in this impossible situation, forced to make unthinkable choices, constantly navigating the power dynamics of the past and the present.
And that's where the psychological aspect comes in, right? It's not just the physical threats, which are terrifying enough. It's the mental and emotional chains she has to break free from.
Yeah.
It makes you realize how deeply the scars of the past can run.
Yeah, and that connects back to that grim fantasy
Uh,
element that Butler weaves throughout the story. It's like this constant tension, this fear that Dana could get stuck in the past.
Especially with the way time travel works in this book. It's not linear or anything.
Not at all. It's fragmented, almost unpredictable.
Right. Like one minute she's celebrating her birthday in 1976, the next she's fighting for her life on the plantation.
Exactly. And the time she spends in each era, it doesn't necessarily line up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. And that scene where she tries to escape and ends up back in her own time, but her arm is fused to the wall where Rufus was holding her. Chilling.
It's a powerful image, right? Like a physical manifestation of how the past can linger.
Exactly. It's like she's saying you can't escape history. And that kind of leads into something else I wanted to touch on. The way Butler uses these really vivid details to bring the past to life. The Kirkus Review mentioned that too.
Yeah, it's that attention to detail that makes Kindred so immersive. We're not just reading about the horrors of slavery, we're experiencing them. The sights, the sounds, even the smells.
Right. It's almost like you're there with her. And it makes you wonder, what would I have done in that situation? How would I have navigated that world?
It's a question that stays with you long after you finish the book. But it's not just about understanding the past. Either Kindred also brings up these really interesting questions about interracial relationships.
Yeah, both in the context of Dana and Kevin's marriage, and then more broadly in the context of both eras.
Right. And how their relationship is seen so differently depending on the time period. It makes you think about how much society has changed or hasn't changed.
Exactly. And then there's that added layer of how their relationship is affected by time travel itself. The power dynamics between a white man and a black woman in the antebellum South. Even with love in the equation, it adds a whole other level of complexity.
Definitely. And speaking of complexity, we can't forget about the role of gender in all of this. Dana isn't just navigating the horrors of slavery, she's navigating them as a woman in a time when women had very little power.
Absolutely. And one of the online reviews actually called Dana a feminist icon, which I thought was really interesting.
I agree. She's constantly pushing back against the limitations placed on her both as a black person and as a woman in both centuries.
She's not just surviving, she's actively fighting back against those constraints. And she has to make these incredibly difficult choices, sometimes even compromising her own morals, just to stay alive.
Yeah,
It makes you really think, what would I do?
that's what makes Butler such a brilliant writer. She doesn't give you easy answers. She forces you to sit with the discomfort of it all.
Exactly. There's something else I found fascinating that I wanted to get your take on. I didn't see much about it in the sources, but it really struck me. The ambiguity around Dana and Kevin's racial identities. We don't get those details right away.
That's true. It's like she's making us confront our own assumptions as readers.
Right. Like, how do we understand race? What happens when those categories get blurred?
It's a really interesting narrative strategy. By holding back that information, Butler forces us to examine our own biases. And it makes you realize how much those categories, we use those labels, they're often more about social constructs than anything else.
It's like she's holding up a mirror to society. And it feels especially relevant today, given everything that's going on with conversations about race and identity.
I completely agree. It highlights how fluid those categories really are.
It's like our understanding of race is shaped by the past just as much as the present. These categories we use, these labels, they carry so much weight.
That's exactly it. And it all ties back to this idea that runs through Kindred, that the past isn't really over and done with. Yeah. It's still here, it's alive in the present, and shapes our lives in ways we don't even realize.
It's true. And I think that's what makes Kindred such a powerful and important work. It's not just a story, it's a call to action. It makes us confront these uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about our history, about the legacies we carry with us.
And she does it in a way that really gets under your skin. One of the online reviews mentioned this Butler-sized book hangover. And I gotta say, I felt that it sticks with you.
It really does.
Yeah.
It's not an easy read by any means, but it's an important one. And the way Butler writes, the way she makes you care about these characters, even when they're going through these awful things, it's incredible.
She doesn't sugarcoat anything, but there are these moments of hope, moments of connection, love, resilience, even when everything seems hopeless.
Like Dana's relationship with Alice. That one really got to me.
Yeah.
You have these two women from such different worlds facing unimaginable cruelty, and yet they find this way to support each other, to form a bond that goes beyond their circumstances.
Absolutely. And it speaks to that strength of the human spirit, the ability to empathize and connect, even in the darkest of times. It reminds us that even within the horrors of slavery, there were acts of resistance, moments of grace, stories of survival, and those stories deserve to be told just as much as the others.
They really do. This whole deep dive has really got me thinking about the impact of history, how the choices made generations ago are still shaping our world today. It makes you wonder, what am I doing right now to fight against the harmful legacies of the past?
That's the question Kindred forces us to ask, isn't it? It's not enough to just acknowledge the past. We have to learn from it, challenge it, work towards a better future for ourselves and for everyone who comes after us.
It's a powerful message, and it feels more relevant now than ever. So if you're looking for a book that will challenge you, make you think differently, and stay with you long after you finish reading it, Kindred is it.
Couldn't agree more.
And there you have it, another deep dive in the books. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to all the sources we talk about today. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.